Hey friends, Chris Gonzalez here from the Movement Training Company, and today we're going to talk about what to look for in a minimalist shoe. Now, before we dive in, just a quick note, make sure you're transitioning slowly over time into this sort of footwear because it's allowing your foot to do a lot more of its natural stuff, but it's stuff that it's not used to doing. So it requires re-strengthening of all that musculature, reworking of the mobility and the soft tissue. So just make sure you go slowly over time, and you can even check out my functional feet program if you want that dives in depth as to how to re-strengthen, remobilize, and transition. Okay. Okay, moving on. What do we look for in our shoe? I always do what I call a shut check. Now, shut, of course, is an acronym, and it stands for sole, heel, upper, which is everything above that sole, and toe box. So, starting with the sole, you want to find a thin, flat, and flexible sole. So you want to be thin and flexible because we have 33 joints from the ankle down, and that's 33 in each foot. So that accounts for a quarter of the joints in our entire body. But when we have a hard, rigid sole in the shoe, it renders all those joints useless. And then other parts of the body have to compensate for those massive amounts of joints and muscles that aren't getting to do any of the work. And if you know anything about a fine tuned machine, if another part of the machine has to compensate for this part, problems are going to happen. That's just the nature of things. So by having something that's thin, flat, and flexible, your foot's going to be able to naturally conform to the environment below it, which is what it was designed to do, hence all of those joints. So when you step on a stick or a rock, you're going to be able to bend around it instead of rolling your ankle. It's also going to allow you to have better what we call proprioception, which is your input of what's all around you from a spatial awareness standpoint. And I'm not going to dive any deeper into that. Just know it's good to have your foot gathering more information because it's going to send it upstream so your body can make better decisions from a movement standpoint. Okay, so that's a quick look at the flexibility standpoint. The flat part means we don't want to have arch support. Now, this is counter to what a lot of us have been taught in our society, and it's because of this self-perpetuating cycle. When we're young, we get put in shoes that support our arches and that don't allow our foot to conform to the environment below us, therefore working those muscles. So all those muscles start to atrophy. And then all of a sudden, our feet can't support our body weight, which is the most fundamental, basic biological function of a foot. But we have people saying, hey, you need arch support because your foot can't take all of that load. Well, that might be true, but ideally, in a better world, you should be re-strengthening that foot, re-strengthening those muscles in the arch so it can take all of that load. It would be insanity if your doctor said, hey, your neck bounces around a lot and your head moves when you're running, so you should wear a neck brace every time you run. Well, hopefully none of us would do that. But that's exactly what we're doing with our feet. We're ignoring the fact that our feet are so weak they can't support us, and we're just giving them extra external support, which leads to problems down the line. Instead, we need to be re-strengthening and retraining those arches to do what they're biologically designed to do, i.e. support our body in motion. Okay, so that's a look at the arch support. Next, we have what we call toe spring. So a lot of shoes, especially athletic shoes, you'll notice the toe comes way up off the ground when you just set it on the floor. Now, this is because the sole is so hard and rigid that it's not allowing all those joints to twist and conform and do their job of propulsion. So instead, they had to design this rocking motion here with the toe spring so you could rock forward as you stepped. Now, it's just a classic case of you render one thing useless, you create a new problem, so you have to create a new solution, which then creates a new problem. So by wearing those shoes, you're constantly in an upturned position, which you don't want to be in. That's not natural. That's not biologically how our feet are supposed to be all the time. They're supposed to be in constant motion, twisting, conforming, and adjusting to their environment, not locked in a functional cast of a shoe. So that's a look at the toe spring. So to review, you want it thin, flat, and flexible. Next, in our SHUT acronym, we have our heel. Now, you could say the heel's part of the sole or part of the last in technical shoe terms, but it's so important, it deserves its own section. So, what do we look for in the heel? We want what's called a zero drop shoe, meaning The heel is the same level as the toes. Most shoes are raised up in the heel in modern design. Now, the obvious offender is our giant stiletto heels, and everyone knows those are terrible for your feet. However, even our athletic shoes have a raised heel. And a lot of us don't notice this because it's just culturally normal. And frankly, we're not trained to look for what's going on in our shoe like that. So these are raised in main part just because that's how shoes have been made, and then they made them like that again, and then they made them like that again, and it doesn't serve a major function. You could trace it back a long time to some dignitaries saying, hey, we have these raised heels so we look higher and we're more important and we can stay out of the filth in the street. You could look at some cowboys and say, hey, it helps us get on our horse better and hook into the stirrup. But now, for the most part, there's no need for it. The most common argument is, hey, we need that thick heel pad for when we run so we don't hurt our heels when we land on the ground. Well, the problem with that is it's perpetuating poor running mechanics, in my opinion. Basically, it's another self-perpetuating cycle. We started putting on shoes that had heels, which altered our running gait, or gait is a fancy way of saying how we run. It altered that. And so now, because of our altered running gait, we need that heel support, that heel padding, that heel cushioning to support that poor running pattern. So instead, my vote and my perspective is, hey, learn to run naturally and transition to these shoes. Because once you get in these shoes or you start running barefoot, you'll figure out real quickly if the way you run is natural or not. Because when you slam that heel into the ground without padding, you know, hey, something is wrong. So instead of masking that signal, use that signal to learn and grow as a functional human being. So that's why I don't think that padding is necessary at all. And the problem with this raised heel is it alters the geometry not only of the foot, but of everything up the chain as well. Imagine if you take, say, a modest heel on a running shoe that's maybe ½ inch to an inch, so about this big. Imagine if you take your bookshelf and you shove a wedge this big under the back of it, what's going to happen? All your books are going to tilt and fall off. Why? Because you altered its normal geometry. Well, because we're dynamic human beings, we're able to compensate for that in the short term. But the trouble with compensations is in the long term, they can create problems. So when you're raised up on a heel, it shortens the calf to a length that is not designed to be at all the time. But your body says, hey, since we're here, we might as well get rid of the ability to go into good dorsiflexion, which is this motion right here. So that then creates problems at the knees and the hip and all the way up the chain. Even your neck problems can stem from heel problems oftentimes. So I'm not going to dive deeper into that, but that's a look at why the heel is so important. Okay, next we have our upper. Now this one's a little bit easier to understand. We're looking for an upper that keeps the shoe on your foot by itself and that doesn't overly constrict the blood vessels in your feet. So basically, when we have a sandal like this that doesn't stay on by itself, our feet have to compensate. So what usually happens is our toes grip as we're going through our walking, not in the normal spread grip push off motion of our regular natural barefoot gait, but in a, hey, I need to hold on to the shoe so I don't lose it sort of way. So it completely alters the tension in the foot and also your walking gait once again. Now, the other thing that happens in flip-flops oftentimes is people start to walk with more of a turnout in their feet. Because when you're straight and you're walking off, that's when your shoe wants to slide off. But if you turn out and you're walking, then these side straps catch your shoe a little bit better. So it's changing your foot dynamics, it's changing your gait, the tension, and the gripping patterns. So you want to make sure to have something that holds your shoe on by itself. Now, the other thing is you don't want it to be overly constricting. We have a bunch of very important arteries and blood vessels that run through the feet, and for obvious reasons, you don't want to be constricting those. So even if you have a great shoe or sandal, don't wrench them so tight that you're limiting that blood flow. You have to find that sweet spot of holding it on, but not limiting what's going on as far as blood and also lymph flow. Lastly, airflow is important. It's important to have a breathable shoe because otherwise this turns into a disgusting cesspool of germs and bacteria And I'm not going to go deeper into that because obviously we don't want that. So just make sure it has a good breathable upper as well. Okay, lastly, we have our toe box. What is the toe box? It is, as the name implies, the area that holds the toes. Now, you want to find a toe box that's foot shaped, that's wide enough to allow your toes to splay, which is a fancy word for spread, and also grip the ground in their natural way as you walk to support your gait, your walking, your propulsion, and also your balance. Now, it might seem like an obvious request to say, hey, we want a shoe that's shaped like a foot. But the sad case is, our shoes aren't shaped like feet anymore. Just pick up a regular shoe. I don't have one because I haven't had one for years. I kind of wish I had one to show you. But pick one up and look at it compared to the footprint of your shoe. Your foot's like this. I'm exaggerating because I have a good shoe here. And it doesn't fit in the shoe. We have to scrunch them. Now, again, the obvious offenders here are our fancy dress shoes. But even if you look at our athletic and running shoes, it's the same thing. The most problematic area is going to be on the lateral or outside, and your pinky toe and the equivalent of your ring toe are really going to be scrunched in. And you might even notice when you take off your shoes that your toes are scrunched together like this. That's not how toes are supposed to be. They're supposed to be spread. Just look at a kid's toes. They're spread, they wiggle them all the time. They're designed to function as dynamic moving systems, independent of each other, gripping on the ground and giving you all sorts of good feedback. So that's a look at our toe box. Now, there's not really a good argument for having a tight toe box, with the exception of climbing shoes, which you'll see up there, which those do serve a purpose to climb a little bit harder, but just make sure you're doing supplemental toe work to undo that little bit of time you're wearing those shoes. But in the grand scheme of things, there's no real reason to have your toes scrunched other than that's what we've always done and we think it looks normal and good when it's the least normal thing that we can do with our feet. Again, they're designed to spread and we scrunch them. And it's really important to let your feet do feet things and to have shoes that support the proper functioning of a foot. So that's a look at our shut test. Again, sole, heel, upper, toe box. Make sure all those things are dialed in, and you are going to be taking the right steps to taking care of your feet in everything you do throughout your day as you walk around. Thanks so much for watching, for taking the time to review this whole video. Feel free to go back and watch it. There's also show notes in the bottom below, as well as links to some of my favorite minimalist shoe companies that you can check out as well. Again, I'm Chris Gonzalez from the Movement Training Company. Thanks for watching. This video was brought to you by the Functional Feet Program. If you want to learn how to have happy, healthy human feet, or how to transition into minimalist footwear and barefoot living, then head over to movementtraining.co to get all the information you need to know. Also, don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on our most active social profile, which is Instagram. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.